4 years ago, I set out to make my first commercial game. Dishonoured meets Thief, I said to myself, but in VR, how fun would that be? It was to be a stealth-based immersive sim, where you sneak around and blow stuff up. I had already decided on the backstory for the game, the art style, and the main mechanics that the game would be built around. This went against all industry recommendations, because what do they know? Make a small game for your first game? Don't make an immersive sim? Do they know I was a black belt at the Dojo Temple in Club Penguin? I think not, so off I went. In this video, let me show you how I went from an empty scene in Unity to having a Steam demo a few months away from release, which will be on my store page. You should definitely wishlist it, also on Meta, if that's your thing. Anyway, enjoy. I began by planning the game around 4 main pillars of development: the sandbox, AI and combat, destruction, and environment design. It took a good few months to get the basics down and to a point where the sandbox of the game felt good enough to continue. So I began creating the enemy AI by making a chicken as a base. This took 3 months and funnily enough isn't even in the game anymore. Maybe one day.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
Anyway, this turned me to Blaze AI on the Unity Asset Store, as without it the project would have ended right there and then. I played around with these systems, designing the ideal AI for my stealth game, and that was it. 6 months of working on one project. I had never made it this far and started to feel the illustrious pull of that new, shiny, ever-optimistic promise of starting a new project. I said to myself, enough of starting new projects every few weeks. It's time to actually release a game. Anyway, full speed ahead, and for another year and a half, I developed the combat system and enemy AI for my game. Now, I don't know if you know, but enemies in immersive sims tend to be quite complex, with the ability to react to multiple scenarios in ways that you would expect someone to react. They see a dead body, they better go over and investigate. They spot the player, you better be ready to fight. Fighting? In VR? Now let me tell you how I got that working. With tears of sadness and pain. And Puppet Master, of course, as this is a VR game, so the enemies need to be floppy and physics-based and stuff. This took some time, but through many iterations, I found a nice balance to the combat that met the pace and theme of the game that I'm going for. At this point, it was time to implement the fire system into the game. This system would allow the player to burn it all down, and was the final piece needed for a closed gameplay loop. I implemented it with the enemy AI, allowing them to switch to a burn state when on fire, causing them to run around randomly until they die. I then created a Zippo lighter and oil system, allowing the player to actively burn things, which worked well with my game manager script, as I was able to set any object as the objective and call level complete once it had been burnt. If you're new here and you'd like to see more about the systems that I've just spoken about, there are other videos on my channel that do a deep dive into the sandbox, the enemy AI, and the fire system. With that said, please enjoy the rest of the video. This progress allowed me to begin designing the art style and the look of the game, along with the first sandbox-based level, this being Wavestone FM, kindly named via the community Discord server, which you should definitely join, by the way. Anyway, this mission or level was to be set in an old castle, retrofitted with a communications tower that the enemy used to transmit encrypted messages to the capital, allowing them to continue their oppressive regime. The level was to be open-ended, allowing for the player to choose their approach on how they would complete the objective. So I began creating the environment using Pro Builder within Unity, and this old sketch I had made for the design of the castle layout. Along with developing this level, I began reworking some of the placeholder assets and creating new ones that better fit the final visual design that I'm going for. Around this time, I also started using Substance Painter for texturing, which allowed for a visual overhaul of the enemies, turning this ugly piece of Play-Doh into this magnificent bastion of human talent and ability. As this was to be the main level for the Steam demo, I needed to add an objective for the player to complete, with the goal obviously playing into the title of the game and centering around burning down the radio tower. With the fire system already working with my game manager, this was quite easy to implement, and I just needed to create the logic and events on how the tower would collapse. I also created these support cables that are an alternative way of destroying the tower if the player doesn't want to burn it down from the base. All 3 of these must be destroyed to trigger the same collapse logic. This is where the level really began to form into its own unique identity, and was at a stage where I was confident enough to allow people within the Discord to play the game. This was super helpful as it allowed for playtesters to break apart my game and give valuable feedback as to what is missing and what needs to change. Through this, I was able to accelerate development of the game by being able to focus on the most important and pressing aspects of development, like adding fall damage to the player, fixing heaps of bugs, tuning weapon parameters and enemy difficulty, and adding more features to make the level feel more engaging and complete. I created the spotlight system for the far side of the level, making it more dangerous to take this route, as when spotted, a siren calls for all enemies within the level to come running out looking for you. I then created Molotov cocktails that work with the Zippo lighter, directly allowing the player to burn the enemies and objectives with a simple throw. This all led to something that the game was sorely lacking: enemy variety. At the time, the only enemy within the game was the Footmen, a simple melee enemy that was quite easy to defeat. The game needed some spice, something to really put the player on edge, and something that has been a long time coming: the ranged enemy known as the Copper. Sporting a double barrel shotgun, this dude is deadly. I made the shotgun blasts affect the environment around them to add to the chaos when the player is under fire, and gave the Copper this sweet reload animation that gives the player a brief window of attack if they manage to survive the first 2 shots. This naturally led to creating a shotgun that the player can pick up from the dead enemy and use to blast their way through the mission. Upon shooting, the surrounding enemies are alerted to the shot position, as shotguns are, loud. And if you use it against an enemy, there is a large knockback force, which I think is quite fitting for the style of the game and cartoonish look of the enemies. I also created bullet impact particles and added forces to the shotgun itself to create a kind of recoil that can be mitigated by holding the gun with both hands. This went through a few iterations and took longer than it needed, simply because I was having too much fun. At some point, I also added this goofy looking knife to the game and made it so that the enemy AI were stabbable. This really added to the style and fantasy of the game, as you could now sneak around and stealthily take out the enemies if you managed to go by undetected. I then added the auto mantle feature from Boneworks to allow for easy traversal, which greatly improved the overall feel of the game. This was thanks to my Bulgarian mate Kolev, who ripped it straight from his own VR game and gave it to me on a silver platter. Go check out his project, I think you'll like it. Anyway, with this, I was able to finally make that Steam store page and trailer that I mentioned 10 months ago. I published the page and I'm now looking to release an official Steam demo beginning of next year. But if you'd like to play the pre-release build, there's a link in my Discord server. It's been a long time coming, but the final vision for the game is finally taking shape. So please go wishlist the game on Steam or the Meta store page, and I'll see you in the next video. As always, thanks for watching.